Hey, friends, welcome to the gathering. I am David Ault, and this is a bit of an on the road edition. I am teaching and speaking this weekend in Charlotte, North Carolina. And before I get ready to go and do that in this early morning hour, I wanted to touch base with you. And it's my birthday week. I will turn 64 years of age. It's just hard to fathom. So that the Beatles song comes up. What are the words? Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64? And of course, you're probably like me. If you ever heard that song when you were young, you thought, "Oh my God, that's old. That's a lifetime from now." And it's interesting because this past week had some literalism around those lyrics because I still wasn't feeling well and had a doctor's appointment. And so I had to come to a decision about something that I've been working on or with for quite a while now, and that is high blood pressure. Um, Something that has run in my family, but I was doing all the things and watching salt intake and making sure I was walking and moving and doing all the things and whatnot. And it's still wasn't being managed enough to where any health professional was happy. So I succumbed and I decided to take a medication for that. And I was told that it would make me a little wonky, perhaps for a couple of days, because my body was adjusting to the pressure and the sort of the sustaining effort it was giving to deal with it being high. So it's being regulated. So I'd feel a little off. And I did. And on top of that, when you go to the doctor, they say, "Hey, you're due for this, and you're due for this, and you're due for this." And I guess I felt like I was shopping with a Groupon or something, and I might as well get it all done. So I also got a shingles vaccine, the second one of a shingles vaccine. Well, the combination of all of that was probably not wise. Or it just I had to accept the fact that I just didn't feel well. And so I was recalibrating with all of that. And what happened was that I noticed an old belief about myself pop up because I like to cook in our household, and my partner has a very stressful job. And so one of the one of the love languages that I offer him is to try and make sure that there's dinner and that we can have our time together. And also, we had previously gone out and bought some more plants to put in the yard. And so all of a sudden, I had zero energy to be able to cook, and I had zero energy to be able to go and finish the job of all of the planting and whatnot. And he did all of that. He stepped up to the plate beautifully and went out and not only planted and, where do you want these? And was so kind about it, but also cooked after putting in an entire day of really stressful work. And so the belief that was coming up was that I'm a burden. And if you've hung around or been a part of any of my teaching over the years, you've heard me share the example of the 6-second moment. And this is something that I think is so incredible. I think it's an essential part of our evolution into a greater self-awareness. And it reminds me of that Carl Jung quote that until you and I make the unconscious conscious, it will run our lives and we will call it fate. Something like that. I may be paraphrasing, but until you and I make the unconscious conscious. And so the 6-second moment theory is about that. It's about making the unconscious conscious. And I call them themes. And often in my teaching, I will tell the story about when I was 7 years old and came from very little means, that story as well. And so there weren't enough bedrooms to go around for all of my brothers and sisters. And I was the youngest of the family. And so when I was a toddler up until this age of 7, I slept on a cot by the side wall of my parents' bedroom. And back then there were rotary phones. And so the rotary phone was on a pedestal by my parents' bedroom door. And so when the VA hospital called at that inevitable 3 a.m. in the morning time to tell her that my father had passed away, I was right there on the cot. And so, you know how you can hear the voices of other people when in those types of phone calls, and you can hear the conversation. And so I could hear the attendant nurse informing my mother of what had happened. And so she hung up the phone afterwards. She picked it back up and she called my aunt and told her what happened. And then here's the 6-second moment. She said, "What am I supposed to do with a 7-year-old boy? I'm right there." So I hear that. I don't have a developed intellect or any kind of skill to work with that information. So it wasn't as if I sat up and said, "Oh, this is my new reality. I am a burden." But you know how those things seep in. So it seeped into my psyche, my thoughts, and I could tell that there was anxiousness, there was worry. I could tell that this pivotal thing had just happened. But my interpretation of that statement, what am I supposed to do with a 7-year-old boy, developed into this generalized belief that, oh my God, I guess I must be a problem. I guess I must be a burden. And that snowballed. It created this sort of avalanche of a new identity that I'm in the way, that I'm a burden, and that, wow, if I'm going to stay in this household, I'm really going to have to work at that. I'm going to have to not make any mistake. I'm not going to have to do anything to cause anyone else stress. In order to validate my existence. And again, it wasn't as literal as that, but that became the cultivation of who I thought that I was, just from that 1 6-second moment. And so Carl Jung says, until you make the unconscious conscious. So that was an unconscious development. And it wasn't until I was an adult. In fact, it wasn't until I was living in Los Angeles, still an actor, and I was participating in rebirthing, the conscious breath work with Sandra Ray. And I don't know which breath work session I was in. It felt like it was somewhere in the middle. But in that breath work rebirthing session, that whole event came up. One of the things I always loved about when people would describe breathwork sessions, it's like when you go, or when you hold something, like when your body tenses, you can imagine that it's that tension that is locked in you cellularly. And so when you're breathing consciously, when you're doing this kind of therapeutic breath work, those things that are locked begin to unlock. begin to open. And so if you think of it as a cellular memory, then when you're doing conscious breath work, cellular memory starts to unlock. And that made sense to me because that's exactly what happened in that breathwork session. All of a sudden, there I was, and there was the phone call, and there was my mother's statement. And I was in awe of that memory. I was in awe of the self-appointed belief that I was a burden, because I saw that that's how I had played my life out up until that point. I was a young man, and I was in my 20s. So this is more than 40 years ago. But I had reviewed all of my choices and the way in which I had showed up in life until that point in time. You know, by that time, I had done the schooling. I had gone away to college. I had moved to New York City to be an actor. I had pounded the pavement to try to get somewhere. And I could just see how every time I showed up in any of those scenarios, I immediately felt less than or foreign. This is a shared thing that we all have in some form or fashion. But that in that process, there was this idea of, ooh, they all have it together and you don't. So you're going to have to work really hard to catch up. Otherwise, you're going to drag this whole experience down. Or even as an actor, it was like, you're going to have to study harder. You're going to have to do more in order to be seen and validated, because you're just an annoyance if you don't. So all variations on a theme, right? So this past week, that theme comes back up again. I'm like, I felt like a burden. I felt so uncomfortable with the fact that my beloved was cooking and my beloved was out there planting the plants that I'm supposed to be planting. That's my role. That's my job. And here's the beautiful thing. This is evolution at its most primal. I thought, the theme never goes away. The 6-second moment never goes away. But what happens with it is that there's an acceptance and an understanding of it. And it's no longer driving the bus. It's no longer in charge. We just go, look at that. There it is. And we love it. We express compassion for it. And instead of feeling bad, I allowed myself to feel blessed that in that moment in time, even though I didn't feel well, that I had within my life just beautiful care. Someone who loved me, someone who didn't see me as a burden, someone who reiterates on a daily basis how much they love me. And so until you and I make the unconscious conscious, we can still be doing this thing called life, no matter how old we are, no matter how much we've been at this, no matter how spiritual we think we are. Those themes are still there. And I believe that daily they kind of skirt around and dance around because they're in us. And I don't subscribe to the idea that we get rid of them, that we completely eradicate them, but that we grow to see them as a part of our development, almost like a teacher. And so that collected belief becomes a teacher that propels us to do something, to become curious, to actually maybe perhaps even become so much in pain that we reach out for help. So everything is facilitating, pushing us into our evolution. And the other thing about that 6-second moment was that when I was aware of it in my 20s, I could see that what my mother said had nothing to do with me. it was a statement that is easily and readily made by someone who is in fear, who is maybe even angry that she's been put in this position, widowed with all these children. That would be a very common thing. And so it had nothing to do with me, the essential me, but I took it to have everything to do with me. And I have since come to realize in all of the beautiful work that I get to do with people is that really is the crux of that 6-second moment, of that unconscious adopted behavior, is that we take it to have everything to do with us. And we miss the fact that it's just something that came out of the mouth of another person who is also burdened by their own belief systems and their own self-doubt. And so it just becomes regenerative and recycled. And so today, what I would hope for you, what I would wish for you and love for you is that as you reflect on your themes, am I a burden? Am I not good enough? That you just play with the idea that there's no truth to that. It's only that we have revisited it over and over and over again. It's only a lawful formula. So if I revisit something in mind over and over, it becomes my reality. And so I get to be right. And then there are things that want to show us that those are not right, that we do matter, that we are loved. And it vies to get our attention, just like my beloved was exhibiting behavior that was counter to that old belief. And so I'm thankful. I'm thankful that no matter how old I get, that someone will still need me, someone will still feed me, even when I'm 64, and they will love me for that. And it's my responsibility, no one else's, to see that, to allow that. That's important, to allow that and to accept that. So yeah. So 6-second moments, something as little as 6 seconds can define what we still believe about ourselves to this very day. I hope that you know that the true belief of you is that you are loved and valued. God bless.